Hello again and welcome back to our course on Excel 2013. In this section I'm going to start to look at entering and editing data. Now I'm going to concentrate on getting the data in, whether it's words or numbers, on changing data, selecting data, filling rows and columns and so on, rather than the actual formatting. We're not concentrating so much here on making it look good, we're concentrating on getting the data in. In subsequent sections we'll look at the formatting side. Now in order to follow through this section you're going to need to have a way of entering numbers and letters. If you're using a mouse and keyboard, that's absolutely fine. If you're using a touch screen, you probably need now to use your on-screen keyboard. This is a touch device. I have got an on-screen keyboard and I'll just quickly enable it to take a quick look at it. Now you can see it there, sort of supersize. You should know how to enter letters, switch to uppercase with a shift key and back again, and then obviously entering numbers and some special characters. We'll be using things like finance symbols, dollar signs, we'll be using @ signs, exclamation marks, various other punctuation characters. So make sure you know how to enter those in order to be able to carry on with this section of the course. So let's start with some really straightforward data entry. I'm going to create a new workbook. I'm just going to start with a blank workbook, and by default the selected cell, we talked about selected cells before, is cell A1, and I'm going to type in A1 the word hello. Now if at the end of typing the word hello and before I do anything else I press the enter key, what happens is this: two things. First of all, what I've typed in A1 stays there, so the word hello is in A1, and the selected cell moves down to A2. So if I now type world, press enter again, world stays in A2 and the selected cell is now A3. Now this is the default behavior with Excel when, after typing into a cell, you press the enter key, and as you go forward you're basically filling in a column of data. Now to start entering data anywhere else on the sheet, all I have to do is to click or tap in the cell. So let me click in that cell, start typing 1 2 3, press enter, 2 3 4, press enter, 3 4 5. You'll notice that the same pattern continues, although in this case when we put numbers in, the numbers are pushed to the right of the cell and the words to the left. I'll come back to that in a while. If you're using a touch screen, pretty much the same. Tap somewhere, type what you want to type, and then other than that the behavior is exactly the same. If you wanted to fill in things in a row horizontally, then you would really need to click into successive cells to do it in a very straightforward way. So click or tap to go across the row. So that's the basics of filling in cells on a sheet, and of course they don't have to be adjacent cells. You can click anywhere you like, put data in anywhere you like on the sheet. So let's now look at a straightforward case of setting up some data just by entering it straight into a worksheet. What I'm going to do is to start to enter a list of somebody's expenses. These are expenses related to work, but they could be domestic expenses as well. So let's close the current worksheet and we'll start a nice new empty one. Now we've already seen a couple of ways of creating a new blank worksheet. There's also a keyboard shortcut that you'll probably find useful. It's one of the ones that I do manage to remember and use quite a bit, and that's Control N. New blank worksheet, and what I'm going to do now is to create a little expenses sheet for somebody. Now I'm going to start by selecting cell B2, and I'm then going to type in the name of the expense that this person incurred on their business, and it's going to be now notice that as I've typed that, although B2 is the selected cell, what I've typed won't fit into B2, it's too big, and so it spills over the other cells. Now, it's not actually in C2 or D2 or E2. It's just that Excel, because it can't fit it, lets it spill over. Now, there's a couple of ways of dealing with that issue, but the way I'm going to deal with it first is to make column B wider. Now, before I do that, I need to finish entering the data. I could, as we saw a little bit earlier on, press the enter key. That would enter the data and take the selection down to B3. But I'm going to use this tick symbol here. And if I tick, notice B2 now is still selected. So if I use the tick rather than the enter, the selection stays on the currently selected cell. I've still got the problem, however, that all of that text doesn't fit into that little space. So to make column B wider, if you hover the mouse over the top of column B, you notice you've got a down pointing arrow. Now watch as I move the cursor to the right of B. The shape of the cursor changes to a vertical bar and then a horizontal bar, and on the horizontal bar it's actually a double-headed arrow. While the cursor is that shape, if I click with the mouse and drag to the right, I can make column B wider, and I can make it wide enough to accommodate the words train fare New York to Atlantic City. Similarly, if I hovered over the header of column A, I could do the same there, which has the effect of also moving the left hand edge of column B. So using that approach, I can change the width of any of the columns to any size that I want to. So now I'm going to go down to the next cell in column B and type in the description of my next expense. My next expense, and so on. I'll do a couple of more of those and then I'll be back. So I'm still entering some descriptions for these business expenses. Whenever I'm entering them, you will see on this, which is called the formula bar, a sort of copy of what I'm typing. So I'm part way through typing here cab fare to central business. Now watch as I type district, you can see the copy there. Now that formula bar is particularly useful when, for instance, you find that you've made a mistake, because when you've made a mistake you can either sort of delete back to where you were, or you can put the cursor in the position where you've made the mistake. Now in this case I could either click where I've left the T out of central. I could click between the N and the R here, but I often find it easier to put the cursor in the word with the error in the formula bar, type the letter T, and then I can click again at the end and carry on typing. The other big advantage of using the formula bar, particularly when you're editing rather than entering the content of a cell, is that if at any stage you decide that you don't want to enter what you're entering, or that you've changed your mind about making a change, you can tick this cross. This is effectively a cancel button here, and then it cancels the whole thing. The whole thing's just gone. You haven't got to delete loads of characters. Now the formula bar is pretty useful because I think it particularly helps when you need to edit something that's quite complex, but it does take up space, so there is an option to disable the formula bar. If you go into Excel options from Backstage View as usual, go to the Advanced tab, and somewhere down the Advanced tab, down in the section that says Display, about the third or fourth item down there is Show Formula Bar, and if you untick that then you won't see the formula bar. You can get by without the formula bar. You can do everything that you need to do without it. I tend to use it because I tend to find it very helpful, but you'll find out after a while whether it suits you. Okay, so now what we're going to do is to put in the cost of these expenses. So I'm going to go to C2 and I'm going to put in the cost of this train fare. I don't really know what that train fare would have cost, but I'm going to say $65.50. Lunch, I'm going to say that was 1890, cab fare 14, dinner 32.80, not particularly expensive. Tick the last one. I've got my 4 expenses. Now with these expenses I haven't anywhere indicated that they are amounts of money. I put them as numbers, but they could be any sort of number. They could, for instance, be the temperature of something, or they could be the height or the length of something. So how do I indicate that they're actually expenses? Okay, I could type a $sign in front of each of them, but Excel's a little bit cleverer than that. So let me go back up here to C2, the first expense that I put in, and with that cell selected I'm going to start using one or two of the commands on the ribbon. And the first thing I'm going to do is to, on the Home tab, look at this command here, number. I'm going to click the drop down arrow, and what it comes up with is a list of available data types for the selected cell. Now if I click on the drop down there, I'm given the option general, number, currency, accounting, short date, long date, time, percentage, whole long list of things. There are many more. If I want this to be a currency, then all I have to do is to click on that type and say this is actually a currency field. And not only does Excel now treat that as an amount of money, but it even puts the $sign in for me just to remind me that this is an amount of money. And of course I could tick on the next one, same decision, go down there, currency, and in fact I could do all of them like that. However, there is a better way, and that is, so far we've only dealt with selecting one cell at a time. How about selecting all 4 of these cells? Or better still, how about selecting the whole of column C? Now when you're working in Excel, you're going to find one of the things you often have to do is to make a selection of more than one cell, because you want to apply a command or you want to do something to more than one cell. So it's pretty straightforward in Excel to select more than one cell. If I just demonstrate something over here starting at H3, if I just click with the mouse and pull out like that, I've got a multi-cell selection. I've got several rows, several columns, maybe about 50 cells selected there. If I just wanted to select those 4, the 4 with the amounts of money in, I could select those 4. I could go up here and do the same operation that I did just now. I could even use this little shortcut button here to make them all into accounting number format, or I can choose between different currency formats: English United States, English United Kingdom, Euros, Chinese, French, so on. So having made a multiple selection, I can do several things to those at once. Similarly, if I just want to go back and say they're all currency, that's fine as well. So I can make a multiple selection like that very easily. Similarly, if I click on the header of column C, I will select every cell in column C, and I could say that every cell in column C is actually currency format. That makes this basically a currency column, and when I type something else, say the next item I put in is a value of 29.50, I type 29.5, tick on the formula bar, and it makes it currency. So finally, in this first section on entering and editing data, let's just look at a couple of the equivalent things there using touch. If you tap on the header of column B, you see the double-headed arrow appear, and then all you have to do is to tap and hold that arrow, and you can pull it to the right to make that column wide. just using touch. The other thing you notice when you do that is that you get column B selected with these little circles either side. These are the selection handles that are associated with using a touch screen, and you can use those to extend a selection. It's an important distinction there. The double-headed arrow in the header lets you make the column wider, whereas the little circles are selection handles. Let me just demonstrate selection somewhere else on this sheet using touch. If you just tap a cell, you get those two circles, tap and hold one circle, and you can make a multiple selection in just the same way that I did with the mouse just now. So that's the end of this first section on entering and editing data. Please join me for the next one.